Hello, I'm Lydia, and today we're going to be looking at Needlefelt, and we're going to Needlefelt a common blue damselfly. Now it is common, but it lives in Somerset on the levels and in wetland, which is an environment that is under threat due to climate change. And also the common blue damselfly is a very important foodstuff for things like the roundleaf sundew and the hobby. So it's part of the ecosystem. So the first thing is you need a piece of loose woven fabric, and it needs to be natural fibres. And the reason it needs to be natural fibres is so that your needle can pass through. So if you were working with something like a bit of poly cotton or something similar, your needle would struggle to go through and it would probably blunt it and it might break it. So what I've got here is some old wool blanket, and it's loosely woven so that the needle will pass through easily. The needle will pass through and the wool fibres will connect to it really well. So you could use a bit of old blanket, you could use a bit of old wool fabric that you might find in a charity shop, a bit of wool clothing that you're chucking out, or some cottons, absolutely fine, or linen. Just make sure it's natural. We also need some sort of felting surface in order to work onto, but that your needle can go into. Now what I tend to use, this is my favourite, is just a piece of old Hessian sacking, and I've filled it with the cheapest pudding rice, but you can also get sponges and brushes, and some people have wool mats too. Now on top of that, I tend to put a piece of scrap cotton sheeting. That helps protect the surface and it allows you to remove your work. You also need some wool tops or some just cleaned and coloured Somerset wool or British wool. So these are the wool tops. Now you don't really need wool that is combed out because Needlefelt is about messing up the wool. So if you haven't got wool tops, that's great. We've got messy wool here. Okay, so that's a beautiful colour to work with. You need at least one needle felting tool. Now the number I'm working with today is 38 triangle, which is the one I like to use. Now not everybody uses this, but it's my favourite. I would get yourself 2 or 3 because it's quite possible that you might break them. So get one of those, get 1 or 3 of those. You need some scissors and you need needle and thread. So what you then do is you're going to lay your fabric on your working surface, whatever that is. And what happens is this needle has got a very sharp point, so you're going to need to watch that on your fingers. It's got some little like cuts on the side of this, the length of the shaft there. And what happens is as the needle passes through the wool, it picks up the individual fibres and it just starts knotting it down. So it's kind of like the opposite of combing your hair. It's putting knots in, not taking knots out. And the first job we're going to do is we're going to lay down a bit of background colour. So we're going to put our damselfly against some green. So how we do that is we make sure, if we're working with wool tops, we're going to make sure that the wool is nice and untwisted, and you are going to keep your hands nice and far apart, and you're just going to take off a few fibres. Now, as I said before, needle felting is about knotting. So the last thing you want is a nice straight bit of wool. So you're going to mess it up. You don't want to see the individual lines, the individual grain of the wool. Nice and messy. Start with a little. You can always add more rather than a lot. And then what you're going to do is you're going to move your fingers out of the way and you're going to very gently start stabbing into your background fabric. Now notice I am going into the background fabric, but I'm not going all the way through the mat. If you go all the way through the mat, the needle is going to come in contact with the table and it's going to break. It doesn't like that at all. Now when you've done a little bit, what you need to do is just pick that up And what you'll find is that that wool is trying to come all the way through the blanket. There's little hairs here, and it's starting to hold on. You see, it's starting to hold on there. Now, one of the magical things about Needlefelt is if I decided that I didn't like that now, I've gone off that colour, I've put it in the wrong place, for quite some time, you can tease that off. It's a fail-safe craft activity. But I'm going to put it back on and rework it. So if you're going the right amount of the way through, what you should find is when you pick that up, it's slightly connecting here, notice? And you'll see the fibres coming through. That's perfect. The purpose on my rice mat of this scrap fabric is to be able to pull that off there so that it leaves that untouched and unconnected. Okay, now I'm going to get you to imagine that I've done that all the way over. Right, now for the body of the damselfly. What you need to do is now draw out round your template. You can work straight from the worksheet if you want to. If you've got some tracing paper, great, you can trace around it. Or you can lean your worksheet up against the window with a nice bit of paper against it, and you can trace it off that way. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut out that shape there, but we want the outside shape to be intact. So the best way to do that is just to fold down one of the lines, and use your scissors just to snip in, which means you can drop your scissors through the paper and cut all the way round. Here's one I did earlier. So there's the negative shape and the positive shape. Okay, so what I'm going to do is on my background fabric, I'm going to lay out my negative shape. I'm going to put it that way around so I don't get distracted by the drawings on it. And then we're going to take this fabric, these fibres, these beautiful messed up wool fibres, and just going to pull off a few bits. And then using the template, holding it gently, I'm just going to stab through to get that to connect. And you're going to keep adding until you've filled in the whole body. Right, now the great thing about Needlefelt is that you can work it flat, or you can work it into 3D or in relief. So the more I've added here, the thicker it's got. Don't forget, every now and then, take it off because it's trying to connect to the base. Now, one little trick that's worth thinking about when you're working on something that needs to be symmetrical, so we want our dragonfly to be the same on both sides, is we tend to work to one side. So I'm right-handed, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work along the edge of there on the right-hand side, and then I'm going to turn my work round. I do that for two reasons. That's to make sure that each side is evenly stabbed, but also if you try working over your work, first of all you're going to get a sore arm. You're also more likely to break your needle, and that's the one thing we don't want. We don't want you to break your needle. Right, now you can keep working that so you can see that it's become three-dimensional, but when that's finished, your next job is to move on to the black. Now the thing to be aware of with the colour black is it's really, really strong. So what you need to do with this stuff is go really fine. Only take off a few fibres. If you have to ask yourself, is that too much? Then probably the answer is yes. Go little. Just break that down a little bit. Just go really gently with this to start with. Start on one side, to anchor it down where you want it to be, and then turn it around again to make sure the other side is anchored in. That helps to keep it nice and straight. Now that's got it beautifully taken, and if we turn and look at the other side, you'll see that the black's already come through. Now it might look a bit fluffy, so what I suggest you do, if you have got any long hairs sticking out, is just give it a snip. Again, don't forget to turn your work round. Right, I'm popping on the last bit. One thing I will say, whilst you're just tweaking your last bits, is what we tend to do if we're not careful and we're getting really involved in our needle felt is that we can use our needle to pull the wool in. Now, don't do that, because what you'll do is you'll end up breaking your needle. If you have, however, already got a damaged needle on your table, use that for dragging the wool round and pushing it in. Otherwise, use your needle, your nails or some scissors. Just don't want you to break your needles. So now we're on to our legs. Now you can choose to just do the legs in Needlefelt if you want, and I'll do a tiny little demo of the quickest way to do a leg in Needlefelt. What I would do is twist the wool a little bit. All of the legs are going to be coming from this part of the body. Okay, so they're coming from the top there. What I would do is just stab the one top bit of that little twisted bit of yarn so that it's holding it in place. Put a little bit of tension on it. Stab into where you think one of the little elbows would be. And then you can change the angle. Or if you decide, oh, I don't really like that, it's not working for me, take it off, very easy. And you can choose to go onto the stitch and applique worksheet and see about doing running stitches, which might work for you. So I'm just putting a knot in the end of some black thread. I'm using a large needle. The great thing about working with loose weave fabric is that you can get away with a large needle. And I'm going to put the legs on the thorax. So all insects have 6 legs, of which the damselfly is an insect, and all of the legs come from the thorax. So I'm just going to come from the back. And like I say, insects all have 6 legs. And they very rarely have them all lined up so that they're equal and balanced. So feel free to play around with where you want to place those legs. Then the final thing is to add in some highlights. So you could add in some highlights onto. I would look the large blue damselfly up on the internet because there's some incredible pictures out there. So little bits of white needle felt, or you could add in little bits of silver stitch, and then add on the wings, 4 wings for a damselfly.